Welcome to the B Shifter podcast. I'm your host, John Vance. In a second, Chris Stewart and Josh Blum will be joining me. Today, we talk about tickets. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and we had a lot more questions after the episode, so we decided to circle back and just concentrate on tickets. And of course, we're talking about what we say when we preface our radio traffic when we key the mic. So let's go to the bulk of the podcast today. We'll have some examples, some real world examples from some blue card departments from across the country that will show you exactly how these tickets work and really give you the why behind why we do that as part of our communication routine. And tickets specifically in the blue card world is our entree onto the radio. So it's how we key up the mic and we allow the incident commander to prioritize and really be the traffic director when it comes to any kind of radio reports. So let's talk about why we do this and what the importance of prefacing that radio traffic with the ticket is.
So I think the why is directly connected to radio discipline. So since mobile radios, portable radios showed up, and we no longer had to yell at each other, and you used bullhorns to shout stuff out as incident commanders at the fires. We've now integrated this communication potential into the hazard zone and out to the IC, who's working out in the cold zone, so to speak, right? So with that advent and that capability that's come around in the fire service, then we took it as now we can just talk nonstop to one another about all kinds of things, whether it has anything to do with making the incident any better, giving clear communication direction, processing that information and spitting back out whatever the objectives are that we need to talk about. For the longest time, there isn't a system, or there wasn't an inherent system of how we're going to communicate, when we're going to communicate, what we're going to communicate. It was just this running stream of consciousness that from between the IC and the companies, and just over time through natural occurrences of human behavior. Now we've just started completely talking too much on the radio, and a lot of times talking nonsensically, and asking questions and trying to use the radio to micromanage the work or trying to micromanage what other people are doing. So it became very problematic. So what we talk about in our system is having, number one, a standard process and how you're going to communicate. That's the order model, right? When we talk to somebody about something, give them direction, give them information, give them an assignment, there should be some acknowledgement and being able to spit that back out to demonstrate some understanding. And then when that doesn't happen, it gives the sender the ability then to clean that up and say, no, that wasn't what I meant, or that's not what I said. This is what I said. This is what I want you to do. So first and foremost, that order model thing helps, streamline that communication. And then we started talking about, all right, we need to know very clearly and very cleanly when we're supposed to communicate as a company working in the hazard zone, and when I should be asking questions as an IC or looking for more information from crews trying to do the work. So our system then was built on, first and foremost, the communication process of, we start the incident in the incident command system with initial radio report and then a follow-up report. And then we start utilizing standardized process and how we assign companies to where they need to go. When companies go level one, that quick turnaround of, no, this is exactly where I need you to go. And we utilize task location objective to be able to do that. And then that utilizing the order model to ensure that we understood the receipt of that and that the IC knows that we understood the receipt of that. So we've developed this process and why to streamline it. And then we said, no, we don't want you communicating really necessarily back to us until you've completed the objective part of that TLO. Right? We sent you to this place. We sent you to the second floor for fire control to get a primary search on the main fire apartment. And I don't want to hear from you unless you have finished those objectives, or you can't finish those objectives, or you come across some information that can drive a change to the IEP or maybe even the strategy, and we're going to give that information in priority traffic, right? So we developed a system and process and standardization of how we how and when we're going to talk on the fireground. We have also said that we don't want good news, right? So we no longer want companies to narrate everything that they have going on inside. And that's like really hard for some companies and some incident commanders, because they kind of demand that type of reinforcement, right? And that's all based on insecurities and unsureness of ICs and a system that drives that type of communication. So there's standard process that's driving to the why we have these tickets. And these tickets are, I need to know and understand what it is I'm about to communicate. I need to put it under some form of standard communication process, i.e. the ticket. And then it helps me frame what it is that I'm supposed to talk about. And then it probably should be helping me like, no, I really don't need to say this right now. I can wait. I'm going to wait till we finish what we were supposed to do before I communicate anything on the radio. And then I think the last part of the why of utilizing this system is that triage that JV was talking about, right? So now when there's radio traffic and there's simultaneous radio traffic, folks have been assigned and they're starting to meet these objectives and they're going to spit that back out to the IC, and we have multiple maybe radio transmissions happening simultaneous to one another. The IC then can start to triage those, and I want to know bad news first, right? So if I get priority traffic and I get a status change simultaneously, I'm obviously going to the priority traffic first because I want to hear that, process that, get that back into the system before I then start dealing with the status changes. So we've developed standard and process in how we communicate, in when we communicate, and how we should preface those communications and formulate those communications to actually help us be more efficient. And when we hear companies, when we hear systems using that communication model to a pretty high level of effectiveness, the sheer volume of radio communication goes to almost 30% of what it normally is on the fireground, and their effectiveness is probably increased by some significant amount, because they're not worried about when and how and narrating this communication. They're actually focused on the work, and then when I've met this work, I'm going to communicate what I'm supposed to in the right way. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, to the why, but I think it's really important to kind of set that stage for this conversation.
But something else with that why is when we tell people why we're about to communicate, it triggers them to listen, because I'm telling you what I'm going to say before I'm really even going to say it, or what my communication is going to be about. So if I give priority traffic, everybody on the fireground, every company is listening, and we'll dive more into it. But the strategic IC, division bosses, fire companies on deck, fire companies inside the building, if it's priority traffic coming from the roof, everybody's listening, because priority traffic is going to be a red flag, typically requires a change in incident action plan. Status change, same thing. It's the company's changing location, which requires some sort of an action, or they're going to be coming out to recycle, or they finished an assignment, or whatever it may be. But that front end piece lets everybody know what I'm about to say. So it's kind of like that shut up and listen that catches your attention, instead of all of the garble that you just hear on the radio. And then we miss stuff, right? Without jumping right to it, there's a reason why we say Mayday, 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 because that's the attention getter, right? We're prefacing the traffic. We're about to, there is a Mayday, there's something going on. Somebody can't get out, or is lost or trapped, or whatever it may be. And we're drawing attention to that communications piece and saying why. And when you have a system and you have SOGs and everybody understands what all these words mean, it means a whole lot more. And I can say more with less then also.
Doesn't it really prepare the sender as well to understand what they're going to say on the radio? I mean, if I say I'm giving an initial radio report, I kind of get that formatted in my head and then the standard rundown of what that initial radio report typically sounds like. So it almost tees it up for the person who's keying the mic.
And it also really is teeing it up for everybody else that's listening, right? Oh, Engine 7's about to give initial radio report. I know what that sounds like. And I know where the parts and pieces, should be. And, they're going to paint that whole picture and let us know what's going on and go through that whole, really go through that whole strategic decision-making model, but communicate to everybody the incident action plan, strategy, and all of that. So it's both ways. Yeah. Important for the sender. Like, what does the communications look like and sound like, and what am I going to say? And then probably just as important, or maybe sometimes more important, for everybody else that's out there listening to it. The battalion that's driving down the street that hears a standard communication initial radio report can paint a much better picture than a initial radio report that's all over the place or isn't all inclusive of all the parts and pieces.
And I want to say we're talking about this again because after we talked about this a few weeks ago, we had a number of questions that came in, and we really talked more about strategy than tickets on that last podcast. So we wanted to come back and really concentrate today, and we're going to break down each ticket and what that means to not only the sender, but also the people listening. And maybe you guys can give some tips around that. But one of the questions we had is, where do you draw the line at good news reporting? Because there are some agencies out there that want to hear water on the fire, or that the search is complete. So what's good news versus extraneous radio traffic, and are the two mutually exclusive?
So I think each organization has to kind of figure that out, but it really ties back to, why did we go there? And are you communicating some sort of good news, if you will, that is why we are there? It's not every turn, it's not the play-by-play, it's none of that. But a company keying and saying we have water on the fire is going to be a very short communication, probably come out as a status change, right? Engine 7 status change. Go ahead, Engine 7. We got water on the fire. Primary search is complete in the fire room. We have no needs. Well, that's just a complete update. The incident commander knows we got water on the fire, got a little bit more information. Everybody else, knows what's going on with that. There's value in that, right? And then, that data driving piece of, how long is it taking us to really get water on the fire? And it is important that we know that we are getting water on the fire, right? Like, we can't wrap our mind around we're at a 1,200 square foot house sitting on a slab, one story, and the incident commander can probably tell if they got water on the fire. You're at a 4-story multifamily apartment building, center hallway, can't even tell the building's on fire. Well, there's value in knowing, like, what is that reaction time? How long did it take? And now that I know that they have water on the fire, so I feel, better about that. So I think it's a very, very short, I wouldn't even say list, maybe a couple of things that would be communicated like that, unless they can tie it back to their specific assignment where they have completed something. And then it would still come out as a status change, but it would be based off of the objectives.
And I think it's important not to misunderstand what that communication is, because when we say, or we demonstrate or tell folks we want you to communicate water on the fire, it gives us that value and that information that Josh was talking about, and measurements. All right, how long did it take to get us there, and those types of things, to start to build some standard understanding, standard conditions, and standard actions. Part of that, but communicating water on the fire doesn't not mean you have fire control. Communicating you have water on the fire does not mean we're doing effective fire control tactics, right? So we need to be really specific in our systems about the why, and we're going to communicate it. I'm looking for these types of things, but don't let it get in the way of, no, I want to know when you have fire control and fire and having those standard definitions. So in our system, water on the fire may be similar to, we have the fire knocked down. Well, having the fire knocked down means that we just have water on the fire. We've knocked the fire down. We haven't done any checking for extension. We haven't done any of those other elements, right? And then when we say we have fire control, we're saying, no, we knocked the fire down and we have checked for extension on all 6 or 7 sides, however we want to describe that, right? And we truly have control of this part, this tactical objective there. And so knowing the why we're communicating water on the fire knockdown, fire control is really important. And sometimes knowing and understanding that will help us understand whether we should or we shouldn't communicate it. Because, I'll say something controversial here, right? Accreditation doesn't do shit for me on the fireground, right? I want to be able to account for appropriate data. I want to be able to get good information there, but I'm not going to say it just because I want to have some other measurement. I want to say it because it matters on the fireground, and it's not getting. I'm not confusing those two things. If we can become accredited outside of that, but I'm doing it because it matters on the fireground.
Yeah. So another piece of the good news reporting thing I think that we got back, John, was sometimes I feel like I need to say something on the radio because it was based on my assignment. Well, if the incident commander says, gives you an assignment, go to the third floor, check for extension, and says, let me know when you got that opened up. Well, that's your reason to get on the radio, right? So I've opened this up, and when I get it opened up, I'm either going to report priority traffic because I have it opened up and there's fire there and it's a concealed space fire, which is, we communicate that, right? Or it's a status change probably of, yeah, we have opened this up and there is no extension into the void space. So, it all fits. Sometimes I think people think too much about it. I mean, though we want them to think about it and make sure that their communications fits and that they understand why they're communicating, but it can't just be because I feel good because I'm going to communicate on the radio or I need somebody to know that I'm here. Going back to what Chris just said, is it gonna have an impact on the fireground?
You guys have you mentioned micromanaging too, and there's a sweet spot as far as the communication goes. I've heard ICs get so detailed about engine 12. I want you to go to the rear compartment of Quint 11 and take the positive pressure fan to the alpha side, fire it up for positive pressure ventilation. That is a ton of radio traffic right there. That I would say is micromanagement, because all that company really needs to do is know their assignment. Let them figure out, unless there's some tactical reason for it, where that equipment's coming from and exactly what they're doing with it. That's where we want to trust the company officers, correct?
Yeah, to me, that's one of two things. One of two things, or maybe both in combination, is we've done a horrible job at training them and telling them and demonstrating and having them learn how to actually do things. And that includes where the equipment is and how to use it and where all the elements you need to be effective with it. And then the other thing is that's the insecurity of the IC. Is I'm not insecure enough in my role and my position as the incident commander here. So I'm going to micromanage it because it makes me feel better. Right. And that way they can't mess up, or they're going to do it the way I want them to do it. And that's just, you're going to screw yourself in the ground if that's your standard tactics, because as an IC, you can get away with that in a bedroom fire in a single family residence. Right. But if you're trying to do that for everybody at a commercial fire where you maybe have 8, 10, 12 companies working, they're going to find you hanging from your radio cord in your rig if that's the case, because it ain't going to work for you. And so that insecurity, ICs have to work to get over that insecurity of what my job is, what I'm supposed to communicate, me as the leader of the incident. But maybe one of the most important things in that process is, when do I shut up? When do I listen? When do I allow the work to happen? And I can't manage every detail of the execution of that.
Chris, I think what you just said there is important to talk a little bit more about. We're going to talk about tickets and the reason to get on the radio, why a company would get on the radio. But, on the flip side of that, we're telling companies, here's the reasons we want you on the radio when you finish an assignment or when you can't finish the assignment, basically, or you need support to finish the assignment. Well, as the IC or division boss, we should have the same mindset. We gave this company an assignment, and I'm not going to call them either until really I hear from them unless I see some sort of conditions change, or, a significant amount of time has passed and I haven't heard from them. And I believe that something should have been communicated by now. Right. And I may call and just get a CAN report, but it's not what we oftentimes hear of. Company gets an assignment 2 minutes later, their command's calling them, or division or somebody's calling them on the radio. And it's like, well, they haven't even got to where they were going to do any work. So that whole communications thing goes, both ways with the whole radio discipline piece. And I think that circles back a little bit to you have to trust your companies and your company officers, and you have to trust yourself. And then that whole piece comes back to, the system of, having some sort of a standard or SOG training on that and going through that whole process so that everybody's on the same page. And there's no question when we don't trust or believe in companies, or companies don't believe in the IC, the communications on the fireground is driven up drastically.
So you want to break these down? You want me to start with the first initial radio report and follow-up report, and we can talk about the importance of that?
Let's hit, like, each of these comes out in the form of a CAN report, though. Let's just hit on that a little bit. And that CAN report ties back to really their assignment. So we're going to talk about why you're getting on the radio when we break each of these down, but they all come out in the form, like I said, of a CAN report: conditions, actions, needs. So I'm not reporting every single thing that I see. I'm reporting things that are, important in my geographic area, what I have done or what I've accomplished. And then, specifically what my needs are in my, little geographic area where I'm working. And yes, sometimes it's going to be, we have no needs, and that's fine. But that means that you're accomplishing what you were assigned to accomplish, because you don't need further support. So it's important that we just, in our mind, know that every report from a company is going to come out in the form of a CAN report. Even the Mayday, 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 it's conditions, actions, needs. It's pretty simple. It lines up with everything else that we talk about and teach. So on your worst day, you're not sitting there thinking about what does Lunar mean? What am I supposed to say? It's like, no, it's conditions, actions, needs. That's what we use every single day on the fireground when a company is communicating out on the radio.
So I think it's important to connect the pieces of the system here and say, all right, as IC number one or IC number two, and I'm going to assign companies based on my incident action plan, I'm giving them task, location, objective. Here's where I want you to, here's what I want you to do, where I want you to do it. And the objective, that's the communication piece. I want to know this objective once you've met that, right? And then so as the company then that's getting that assignment knows that when it's time for me to talk, when it's time for me to report back and give some progress or say that I need help, I'm going to do it in a standard way. They assigned me in a standard way. Now I'm going to communicate back. And that conditions, actions, needs really encompasses everything that you could possibly need to communicate. What we're fantastic at is conditions and actions. What we clearly need to demonstrate improvement in is always ending that communication with needs. Because oftentimes you hear and being in that position or listening to other folks do it, we're great at conditions and actions. What is the next question and if we don't provide needs, what's the next question the IC has? Okay, what do you need? Well, that will double the amount of radio traffic just in that piece if we don't communicate that, because I'm going to come back with that question. So let's work on that standardized process. I'm going to communicate what our conditions are, the work we've got going on for actions, and then I don't need anything, or this is exactly what I need to move forward to complete what it is that you asked me to do. And so that needs part of it is a huge crux and a huge connection point to efficient communication back and forth between the IC and the companies that are assigned there, that again can diminish that amount of communication that's going on. And that's an efficiency point.
Well, starting with the initial radio report, and we'll have an example of that here in a second, so you can hear the practical application. Why do we want to say initial radio report before the initial radio report? What's the purpose of that?
It just lets everybody know that the initial radio report's getting ready to be transmitted, so that everybody shuts up. Everybody's listening. You're painting that picture. It sets the stage for the entire event. And, nothing showing means exactly that, nothing showing, right? But, that initial IC1 is going to, set the stage, communicate an incident action plan, talk about strategy, talk about resource, painting that entire picture of what's going on, which from that point, puts all of the gears in motion and in the mind of everybody who's on the response. Every firefighter, company officer, chief that's on the response listens to that and starts to paint that picture. And then in their mind starts to think about where am I going to fit into this? Where could I fit into this? What are the needs potentially going to be? So, it may be one of the most important communications that happen on the fireground. Is what Chief Bernasini said.
Well, so think about the system and order in which we do this, or we're supposed to do this, right? And what we're supposed to communicate. In an initial radio report, we're letting everybody know, number one, hey, I'm here. I'm going to give you an initial radio report, which is a lot of important fundamentals of the beginning of the incident command system. I'm going to report building size, type, and occupancy, right? That matters a lot when we start thinking about tactics and what not only individual companies could do, but having an overall incident action plan. Then we're going to talk about conditions and try to include some location in those conditions. We're going to use standard language in what the conditions are: nothing showing, smoke showing, working fire, or defensive fire conditions. Those are our only four choices. And then we're going to give some qualifiers with it in the location that we may see smoke or fire to then help pinpoint or direct, here's the focus of our operation, and here are the areas that are greatest exposed. So my plan's going to start to deal with all of this initially, and as I get other companies there to be able to fix this to the best of our ability, mostly from a fire control and a life safety standpoint, right? And then we're going to give some foundational command information after that initial action, that incident action plan, right? We're gonna talk about taking command. We're gonna give a resource determination, we're gonna give a strategy. We're gonna give a resource determination, and then we're gonna take command, right? We're gonna formally start the incident command process. Why do we define the strategy? Because that is a critical element for any strategic level IC, is being able to say what strategy are we in. We're in the offensive or defensive strategy based on everything I spit out before we got to this part. Do I need help? And then I'm going to start the command system. So that is a fantastic set of information that we get in the beginning of an incident when it's effectively communicated, we can draw a direct connection to doing a good job in communicating that. Oftentimes points to actually doing a good job in the work that actually has to happen, because initial radio reporters never put a fire out. Initial radio reporters never found a victim, right? But when we communicate that well, we tend to be fairly dialed in. All right, this is exactly what I need to do and what I need to get other companies doing. So it is a very, very important piece of it. It's not the end all be all, but it is a very, very important piece to starting off an incident effectively.
1011 to fire alarm, initial radio report. We have a one-story split ranch, heavy fire, Alpha Bravo corner. Engine 11 stretching an inch quarter, Alpha side. Engine 11 has command. You can get a second alarm going on the strategy.
Fire alarm has that heavy fire showing. Striking second alarm, 5054.
Command for fire alarm with the follow. 360 complete. No unusual hazards from the rear. Spoke to the residents. They said everybody's out of the building. We're doing transitional attack Alpha side. Knocking down the fire. We'll be making entry Alpha side in a moment.
So I thought that was a really nice example of an effective initial radio report. we actually happen to know about that incident. We've actually talked about that incident previously and know and understand that it was actually connected to good work that happened afterwards. But he did a good job of clearly lining out what was going on, what we're going to be doing about it, and then the important command process parts of it in starting that incident command. And that information is valuable information to any conscious, alert company officer and crew that's actually responding in on that incident, that wants to actually get in the game and get in the game in the right way, in the right place, and have the greatest amount of impact. So we're actually setting them up for success. And then it's followed by that follow-up report. There's obviously some dead air taken out of there between the initial radio report and the follow-up report, because it takes that incident that incident commander a second to be able to do that, right? So what that follow-up report is based on some further size up that we've been able to do on the incident, and hopefully that included a 360. It obviously did in this situation. Is now we've got a size up of all four sides, hopefully being able to evaluate all the floors of this to be able to communicate. All right, let's these are the actual conditions that I've seen now being able to lap this building, and I'm challenging or verifying my initial incident action plan with what I said in my initial radio report. I can identify any critical safety things that may need me to change my plan or change my strategy. And then there's a little bit of accountability piece there at the end, right? Of how we're going to set up the accountability system. So, and I think a key part of this is none of that communication should be slowing down the work. Right. And so, again, this company's trained. Those firefighters are doing what those firefighters are expected to do. And especially this is in the Worcester Fire Department. They have a high expectation of what the firefighters get done. That officer has some expectations, them as the initial IC. Right. So that's all happening simultaneously. Nobody's sitting and waiting for the other to do whatever their part is. And it's happening quickly and effectively. Right. And now everybody else has a clue from the beginning, and a better clue based on the follow-up report of what's going on there, and that we tend to have a way better solution, incident action plan, if you will, when we have a better idea of what truly is going on there, when we can better identify and pinpoint the problem. And so, man, that's a really good example, and that's the really trying to demonstrate the value of that, doing that effectively for everybody on the fire ground.
No, I think it's just a great example of setting the stage right from the beginning. And, in that organization, they're going to put, like many fire departments do, 5 companies there and right on top of each other, and they're all still going to level one stage, and they're all going to get an assignment based off that initial incident action plan. But by the time the second company gets to the front of that building, it is probably not going to look like the initial radio report sounded, right? So by the time the strategic IC gets there, it's not going to look like that either. So it's either getting better or worse. So it's that, it's where it all starts. What did it look like? What was going on, 4 minutes ago, and now what's going on at this moment? So what do I see, and what work has taken place? So yeah, great example of a fire department that does a lot of work using the system.
I would say go ahead, Chris.
We get comments and questions as, oh man, that's a lot, or that's too much for initial company officer or initial IC to do. I can tell you it's not. It's practice, right? Knowing and understanding the system and actually practicing and exercising and building a level of competency, you can do it, and you can be highly effective at it. This is not, the gentleman given this initial radio report and follow-up report is fairly new based on what I understand in that system. Like, that is not a long-time company officer. He spent time developing that skill and is doing it a really good job at it. So this is not getting in the way of any work, right? And so I think it's important to demonstrate that firefighters often reach wherever the bar is set. If it's set low, they will go to that bar every single time. But if it's set high, they tend to meet it. And this is one of those cases where you set the bar high, they're doing it, and it's creating positive outcomes, utilizing the system effectively from the very beginning.
Let's explore our status change and roof reports. We'll kind of put those two together and then talk about them separately. So here's an example of a roof report along with some status changes.
Command, Engine 8 with status change. Engine 8, go ahead with your status change. Water supply secure. We're ready for reassignment. Okay, Engine 8, water supply secure. Go on deck on the Alpha side.
Command, Truck 10 with the roof report.
Truck 10, go ahead with your roof report.
Normal time lows. We have heavy smoke coming out of the kitchen vent. Other than that, no indicators.
Command, Truck 5, status change. Truck 5, go ahead with your status change.
Truck 5 got all exterior access points which probably opened up. We're ready for reassignment.
Copy. Truck 5 is reporting all exterior access points are open. Truck 5, go ahead and hook up with Engine 6. We'll have you be with Engine 6 to assist with fire control.
Of course, those are some edits. So there wasn't the order model completed there in the roof report, but we just wanted to play what the company says. And then, of course, command reacts to that. So let's break down the status changes and roof report. And if you want another example, I've got another roof report too. But let's start off with status change.
Yeah, so that first one of Engine 8 had an assignment to make sure that that water supply was secure, which is, that is the anchor of the attack position on the fire ground. So that's critically important. And, once that was completed, they gave a status change to communicate that their assignment was complete and they are ready for another assignment. And then command picked it right up, used the order model, gave them another assignment, and it was complete. So checked off the assignment and got another assignment out to the company, and they used the order model, verified, what they were assigned to do.
Yeah, and it's really that change of position. I did what you said. I'm ready to do something else for you. Where you want me to go, right? And not because the IC is trying to micromanage where they are, right? No, the IC has a plan, and there's a finite amount of resources on that incident. So I'm going to put you in the place that I need you best based on that incident action plan. And that's what that status change is that communication is beginning that process for the IC is, all right, you finish this. Now I'm going to put you here to do this. And that it's part of that IC's ability to manage position and function, that strategic level accountability part of it. All this is running simultaneously, which is pretty slick with this system.
Yeah, and the other status change of the company that was assigned to get the doors opened up, same thing, right? So they got an assignment. Their assignment was to get those doors opened up, though it wasn't necessarily assigned specifically to something that we would, clearly define as a objective benchmark, but there was an objective to open the doors, right? So they completed that assignment. They communicated that assignment was complete. They're ready for another assignment. And again, they got assigned immediately to another piece of work because the incident commander needed a company to do some work with Engine 6. So again, like Chris said, it's that tracking of companies and, resource allocation of what work has to be done. Who do I have to do the work? And using the system helps to streamline all that communications. So that truck that opened up those spaces got a new assignment. You're not going to hear from them again until they've completed the assignment, or they need help completing the assignment, or can't complete the assignment.
So sandwiched in there, we had the roof report. What are you looking for as the IC from the roof report? And what are you looking for as the company officer transmitting that roof report? How do those two coincide?
I think the important value of the roof report is that information that we need from the top side, right? As an IC, I'm questioning if the conditions are so bad on top that we couldn't or shouldn't be there, then should we have folks working underneath, right? That's kind of the fundamental premise there. And then if the conditions are good for us to either be on the roof or be able to say, no, the conditions are such that being inside is the right move, then that's going to support and build. We're going to support and build our plan from there. So the information I want from a truck company is the things that are out of the ordinary. I should have a general idea of what that roof looks like, what's up there, and understand the structural integrity issues or problems that I want to hear about if they're present, right? And so the only way to do that is having the truck company do that. And then if it's something where it's right for them to be on the roof, then they're actually going to help you with a very significant potential of checking for extension, right? And they have the ability, especially in commercial occupancies, to be able to do that from a unique position that companies working on the inside oftentimes do not have the ability to do in the same manner because of smoke, because of high ceilings, because of, a lot of other obstacles that get in the way. But if you're up there and trying to determine whether you've got fire in the attic space or you have fire traveling horizontally into other occupancies in a strip mall or those types of things, then they're in a pretty unique position to be able to do that for you. So that's going to get wrapped into that communication, and you're going to develop some standard expectations of when they go there and what information you want back based on the building type. And it should become a standard process. So they're going to go up there. They're going to get their assignment through task location objective. They're going to go up there. They're going to complete that assignment. They're going to formulate that process. They're going to report it back in the form of or as a roof report. And that roof report is going to be put together as conditions, actions, needs. Here's what's going on up here. Here's what we've done, or here's what we need to do. And here's what I need to either finish it, or I'm done and I need reassignment. And that's what it's going to do for us.
The one thing, and we're going to get to priority traffic, but if you have priority traffic from the roof, which would be like, I've opened this up and there is a working fire in the attic space, or concentrated dead loads with some sort of sagging or something like that, anything that would be a red flag, then it would come out as priority traffic from the roof. So that's going to be, that would raise hopefully everybody's attention to what are they about to say from the roof. And just to circle back around, now that we've heard a few examples of CAN reports with the front end piece being status change or roof report, it helps the IC to start to understand, what am I about to hear? Who's talking and what am I about to hear? And then going even further, if I look at my IC worksheet, where are they also communicating this? And I'm verifying that they are where they were supposed to be, right? So there's a whole list of things that go together when you're actually using all parts of the system together.
So that builds up to our priority traffic. That's going to be the next one we play. When do we call priority traffic? What is priority traffic in the blue card system?
So we use priority traffic as it's that attention getter that it's typically going to result in a change to the incident action plan and sometimes a change to the strategy. So priority traffic is used by company officers, companies, and then division bosses communicating to the IC. So companies reporting to a division boss if they're there and working for them, and then division bosses also use priority traffic to report to the IC. So it's typically a red flag thing. Things aren't going so well, can't complete an assignment, found a victim, fires in void spaces. I mean, there's probably a dozen or so things that, right, you could really, fit into the priority traffic piece. We talk about it from the firefighter level. Eric Phillips has said it a few times, like our firemen should know how to call priority traffic, when to say priority traffic when they're sitting on the hydrant and the hydrant don't work. Pretty important, right? It's like engine 6 hydrant, priority traffic. It's like, well, there's going to be probably a water problem, right? I mean, that's probably what they're going to communicate, but it's something that is going to have an impact for sure on the incident action plan, typically a red flag and something that is not good.
And it gets sometimes, when you don't identify priority traffic or the what that communication is going to be, or have a label for something important that needs to be communicated, then officers and companies tend to think that everything they have to say is really important, right? And so it just becomes background noise, right? And when the statement, when everything's critical, nothing's critical. Well, if I'm just constantly talking about everything and with the same level of criticality, it's we stretched our line in through the front door on the alpha side. It's hot and smoky in here. We made our way to the next room. It's hot and smoky in here. It's like, no, that's all just getting in the way. That isn't actual critical information. What the critical information is we label it and say, all right, this could drive a change to your plan. This was not foreseen, or this is something that I think is a worst case scenario, or the next. We're going to have to change the incident action plan to adapt to it. Assign additional companies to a position. Assign. Now I have fire above 2 or 3 occupancies in a strip mall or in a top floor of an apartment building, and that's going to create some more help needed in there. So that's that change in the incident action plan that Josh is talking about, and it becomes really important. And the use of that appropriately is a big deal, and it actually matters when we communicate that, whether it's from the roof, whether it's from the inside. Hey, a fantastic priority traffic communication is we've got a victim. Priority traffic, we've got a victim. And then that's the condition and the action. The action is, all right, we're removing them, I don't know, through whatever methods, whatever means, whatever direction. And this is what I need to support that. And that tends to close that loop and make that removal of victims that much that better, and the IC is able to support it better.
And that example, sets other things in motion, mostly people's mind, right? The thinking part, but, found a victim. EMS is on standby on the Alpha side. Well, their gears are turning. Like, okay, we're about to receive a victim. And do we have a cyano kit? Do we have all of these other things, right? So no different than the priority traffic. We ends with the need being we need another company. Well, one of the on deck companies is now going to be that much more. They're that much more engaged because they know that if they're working in that geographic area, they're getting that next assignment. They're going to be the next one to engage. So they're listening to that pretty closely, and they're hearing all the information, and they've hopefully heard all the information from the initial radio report all the way through to this point of everything that has transpired. So where's the work going to be? Where's the work need to happen? Where are we going to potentially be working? And what is the specific need with it?
Vance from Engine 22 priority traffic.
Engine 22, go.
I got a victim. We're going to get them out the front door. We need engines to come in behind us. Put the fire out.
Copy. Engine 22 is the victim coming out the front door. Engine 21, take the place of Engine 22. Medic 21, command.
So that's it. Then that IC got the ball rolling, getting the medic on the way, and also finishing the firefighting. So an example of the initial assignment was going through the Alpha side, put the fire out, but en route to the fire, they encounter a victim.
We went in the building with the expectation is there's a high likelihood we could find somebody, or we should have that thought process in our head. That's why we're executing this part of it. And so, but when it happens, well, we go to so many incidents where it doesn't happen. And so that when it does happen, we want to make sure that we communicate it effectively. We don't lose our minds. We don't, go over the top with that communication, but no, we actually found one. I'm going to give you some priority traffic. Here are the needs connected to that priority traffic. And then the IC then starts taking those needs and adds that into the incident action plan and starts using the resources that they have available to them to start plugging in and dealing with those needs. And then it may have, if they were a fire attack company and they now are dealing with a victim, well, if they didn't put the fire out, then somebody needs to start dealing with that, right? So we need to be able to bring other companies in to finish or complete that objective for us inside there. And so then it gives the IC the ability to use those resources to do it. And then that incident commander can communicate some intent in there. Hey, 22's dealing with the victim. 21, I want you to take 22's place. Let's get control of that fire and be cognizant that we may come across more victims, right? Because we know when you find one, there's a likelihood of another. So you connect all that stuff together through effective communication and effective utilization of the system, incident action planning, assigning, CAN reports, all priority traffic, all of it. All right. So that critical point of priority traffic, we have a victim. The only other, communication that we have in our system that trumps that is Mayday, 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 right? And so that communication is very important. It's connected to all the things that we've talked about. It is definitely a priority traffic, right? But it has its own set of circumstances, communication process, and how it gets managed. And we'll talk about that at a separate point. We'll do a dedicated podcast, talking about Maydays and Mayday management and Mayday communication. I don't think we want to cloud that here today. But what we do want to do is Josh is going to talk a little bit about. We just published a new CE that has everything to do with these types of communication, and I'll let him kind of finish off with that.
Yeah. So as we've been doing, we just released another CE this week. It'll be in the Buck Slip coming out announcement as well, but it's specifically on communications, the status change, priority traffic, roof reports, some best practice, communications pieces, the order model, TLO. So it's a really good CE if your organization is looking to, ramp up, retrain, refresh on, the specifics of those types of communications. So in our system, we try to keep tying everything back together. So, and on this podcast, we'll include the SOG for communications that specifically addresses the priority traffic, status changes, roof reports. When do you say it? How do you say it? All of that. And then, clearly we got the different CE modules that align to it that you can train on. And then, Chris, if you just want to briefly hit on, if you're an instructor and you're evaluating your communications and the after action reporting system, there's some very specific evaluation documents there to evaluate these types of communications.
Yeah, so essentially that whole AAR program is the best parts of that tool is assessing how effectively we are communicating, what we're communicating, how we're communicating, the language we're using. And it gives us the ability then to start to measure that performance to be able to stay, all right, what are we doing a good job in, maybe individually or holistically with our communication, and where aren't we, right? And so what we're using is you're using incident audio, you're plugging it in there, and then if we want to evaluate the initial radio report, that's the system will clip that initial radio report, and you take that and you evaluate it through the questions and answers. Is all right, how did we do in assessing building type, size, and occupancy? How do we do in assessing and communicating conditions and location? How did we do with initial action, incident action plan, and then the other elements of that? And it's not just this subjective evaluation of it; it's tied directly to the radio communication. So it's not, no, I think you did a good job, and there's no substance to it. It's, no, you did a good job, and this is why. You communicate these things. This is what you said. This is what it sounded like. Or when we don't do a great job, all right, this is what you said, this is what you missed, or this is how you could do it differently. And there's really no argument. No, that's what you said. We just played the recording of it. So it's way more objective than it becomes subjective. So that system allows us to really assess and evaluate what the critical elements are of that communication, and then be able to communicate to the folks that are doing it. So that's the whole design and purpose of the tool. Now we can get into decision making. We can get into a lot of the other things that it helps us evaluate and measure. But the beginning fundamental was it. All right, how were we doing with communication and utilizing the standard process that we have to be able to do it?
Yeah, so I think just to put a wrap on it, if you do or identify, somewhere that you can improve in your organization with this communications process or anything else within the system, we have an SOG for everything within our system. So if you go to bshifter.com, all of those SOGs are loaded up there. If you do the CE that we just released, we actually posted every one of the SOGs or part of that CE, so you could download them directly from that point also. if you're listening to this podcast, and you want to improve on these communications, you could have your students do the CE module. If you're an instructor, you could have them do the CE module and then use the sets and reps that exist for all 5 building types, where it has status changes, priority traffic, roof reports, all of those, moving parts and pieces, to continue to improve our operations and communications and effectiveness on the fireground. So we continue to work to provide you the tools to help you once you identify areas that you would like to improve upon with some specific tools to do so. So if there's something missing or you're looking for something specific, reach out to us and just let us know. Otherwise, I think that pretty much so puts a bow tie on this.
We're done communicating about communications.
All right. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us today on the B Shifter podcast. Of course, Josh Blum, Chris Stewart. You can get that SOG by checking out the show notes, and we appreciate any questions that you have for us along the way. Until next time, thanks so much for listening to B Shifter.